Is it Grand Vitara reborn? Can it dethrone the Hyundai Creta? What's new? What has changed? What has left behind? How many new features does it pack? Will there be a Toyota version of this SUV? Well, we know you have got a lot of questions regarding the all-new Maruti Suzuki Victoris. Well, we just got to drive it, so here are all the answers to your questions. Well, technically, yes, it is the same car underneath because it shares the same global C platform with the Toyota Hyryder and the Grand Vitara. Even the wheelbase at 2600 millimeters is identical to those two. And in terms of overall dimensions also, it's slightly, in fact, marginally longer and wider than the Grand Vitara. And in fact, even the engine options on this car are exactly the same as the Grand Vitara. On the outside, it doesn't look very similar to the Grand Vitara, even though the wheelbase is the same, like I said, and the profile also looks quite identical. But in terms of its outer styling, well, this takes a completely different approach. You see, the Grand Vitara has a softer, curvaceous exterior, but this one is quite sharp and feels a little crude as well. It is quite sporty, and it also has these squared off wheel arches which really stand out. The wheel design is also different, even though they are of the same size, 17 inches. And at the back also, you'll notice that it gets a totally different design. It has got that connected LED tail lamp, whereas in the Grand Vitara you have got a split tail lamp setup, and that looks quite different. And even from the back, this looks a little wider because of the tail lamp setup. Similarly, at the front, it's a different story altogether because this features a more conventional but upmarket look because it doesn't have those split headlamps of the Grand Vitara. So it looks quite different, quite distinct, and this looks actually quite Volkswagen-ish if I'm honest. But overall, it feels like a wider car. It also has longer overhangs, so in profile, it definitely looks slightly bigger than the Grand Vitara. Now, in terms of which car would you pick in terms of styling, I think again it's your personal call, but I think this one feels a little more crude. This one looks a little more SUV compared to the Grand Vitara. So if you want something premium looking, I still think the Grand Vitara is the way to go. But if you like something that's crude, that looks more sporty, that looks more imposing, well, I think the Victoris does the job quite well. Compared to the Grand Vitara, the Victoris gets an updated set of features, including a bigger 10.1-inch touchscreen infotainment, a 10.25-inch digital driver display, powered tailgate with gesture control, level 2 ADAS, an 8-speaker Infinity sound system, connected car apps, and inbuilt Alexa connectivity. The features which it shares with the Grand Vitara include wireless connectivity for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a panoramic sunroof, 8-way adjustable electric seats, ventilated front seats, a 360-degree camera, a head-up display, and more. The quality and fit and finish has definitely improved over the Grand Vitara because there are a lot of new elements and they make the cabin look more upmarket. So right here you'll see it has this soft touch dash which looks quite cool. You have got contrast stitching, you've also got 64 color ambient lighting, and this pattern right here with piano black finish, it looks quite cool. It's also on the door panels as well. And overall this dual tone thing, it looks quite upmarket and it is at par with what you get in a Hyundai or Kia for sure. So overall, the whole cabin layout is also more upmarket and it definitely feels more premium. And the interior, there's nothing that it shares with any other Maruti Suzuki model. So that's the key change in this vehicle because nothing has been lifted from any other Maruti Suzuki. Even the steering wheel feels quite nice. It has this nice piano black finish again. The buttons are rich quality. And overall, this cabin, well, it has an elevated feel of premiumness in comparison to Grand Vitara. Now, of course, there are a lot of hard plastics still because on the top of the dash, you'll notice the plastics. It is more or less the same as the old car. Even down here, the plastic quality, it's still scratchy and it's still hard. But I think in this segment, you can't do better, and it's not a deal breaker for sure. The seats are quite supportive. It also gets an Infinity sound system, the top end variants. So it is quite good. So overall, the premium factor has definitely gone up. And one big change, one big improvement in the Victoris or the Grand Vitara is the fact that it also gets a panoramic sunroof, but the window liner now it is not translucent or transparent as it was in the Grand Vitara, or it still is in the Grand Vitara. This is definitely thicker, so that means the sunlight doesn't directly come to you. So overall, the cabin doesn't heat up as it is the case with Grand Vitara. So again, this is something that Maruti has listened from the customers, the feedback that they've received from journalists or customers, and they have changed it and they've improved it. So overall, I think it's a big thumbs up for Maruti Suzuki because they have really worked on all the rough edges of the Grand Vitara and they've improved it with the Victoris. Today we got to experience and test the ADAS systems on this car very briefly, but I think they work really well because they are calibrated well for Indian road conditions, and I think it is at par with what we have experienced in systems from Kia or even Honda and Hyundai, in fact. So I think in that regard, the system works very well. But one standout feature in the ADAS system of this car, it is these large and chunky buttons right down here. So that means you can turn off the forward collision warning or AEB at the press of a button. You also have the lane keep assist. You can turn everything off from these big chunky buttons. Now in other cars, mostly everything is kind of controlled from the touchscreen, and it is quite complicated because sometimes you don't want these systems to work and you quickly want to turn them off. So I think in that regard, this is a very practical touch that Maruti has added in the Victoris. And how does it compare with other ADAS systems in the segment? Well, we will carry out a detailed comparison test for you guys with this vehicle and all the other competitors very soon. So stay tuned for our next big ADAS story. At the back, it is quite spacious and it retains that sense of space like we have seen with the Grand Vitara. So you sit in an upright position, the seat cushioning is brilliant, and because of this lighter theme, it also feels airier. You also get these two AC vents here, and you've also got two USB Type-C ports. Now, the other thing is it has got large windows, so that means it has a greater sense of space again. The only thing that is sort of a bit of a compromise, it's the headroom, because I'm 5'8" and I can feel that there is not a lot of headroom. So if you're taller, if you're 6, well, you're definitely going to rub your head against the roof. Now that is down to the fact that it has a slanting roofline, so it definitely eats into the headroom. But overall, I think this is a very spacious cabin, and I think in that regard, it is a match for all of its main rivals in the segment.
The Victoris gets the same engine options as the Grand Vitara. These include the Toyota-derived 1.5-litre hybrid engine with an eCVT and a 1.5-litre naturally aspirated petrol engine offered with a 5-speed manual and a 6-speed automatic. The petrol version is also available with a CNG powertrain, but that's only offered with a manual transmission. Similarly, there is an all-wheel drive or all-grip version offered with the petrol motor, but it's only available with an automatic transmission.
The one we are driving today is the all-wheel drive automatic version. So this is basically the 1.5-litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine. It produces around 103 bhp, and it is a very sprightly motor in the sense the way it picks up pace, it is quite brisk, and it is something that we have come to expect from this drivetrain option. So the performance is more or less the same as the Grand Vitara. It's nothing extraordinary in that sense, or nothing much has changed. Although I can notice that the NVH in this car, it's slightly better in the sense the insulation is definitely better than what we have seen in the Grand Vitara, and it feels a little more refined than that vehicle. Now in terms of performance, well, of course, this engine, it's not going to set your pants on fire because it is quite gradual, it is quite progressive. The way it picks up pace, it's quite brisk, and it's not really an outright performer. So in that respect, if you want something more powerful, well, there's no turbocharged engine in this vehicle at least. So you have to make do with this naturally aspirated motor, and I think there's nothing wrong with it, because if you don't much care about performance, all you are after is a decent powertrain that is effortless in nature, that is refined, and that does the job well, I think this is the engine to go for. Now, of course, you also have the strong hybrid version. So that is the Toyota motor, but we didn't get to drive it, but I'm thinking that's also going to behave more or less in the same manner. It has the same 6-speed automatic transmission like the Grand Vitara. So that means the shifts are quite smooth and they're seamless, although they're not very quick. So again, if you're looking for outright performance, this is not the engine or transmission that you want. Now, overall refinement levels are exemplary, and in daily driving conditions, I think this drivetrain really excels. Also, it is quite fuel efficient, so if you drive it with a light right foot, well, you're going to get crazy efficiency numbers as well. And I think even for a vehicle of this size, it can lug the whole vehicle and the passengers together very comfortably. Now the transmission, it can be locked in manual mode, and in that it also holds the revs, so it can rev up to 6000 rpm. But the thing with this engine is that after 5000 rpm, there isn't much happening after that. So it feels a little flat, and it also gets quite noisy at higher revs. So if you want to extract the maximum performance, you have to keep it below 5000 rpm. And again, you don't really have to rush things up, because this engine and gearbox, well, they like to do things in a more relaxed manner. So in that regard, I think it is a great overall package. But if you're looking for performance, well, this is not the SUV to buy. Where the Victoris feels markedly better than the Grand Vitara is in terms of driving dynamics and even the ride quality. Now the suspension on this, it's been tuned for a more balanced ride and handling. In fact, it feels a little taut, and also the ride quality, it is quite supple, and it soaks up all the road imperfections in a more confident manner for sure. In fact, the ride feels a little firm at low speeds, but in terms of its absorption duty as well, I think it feels again very matured compared to the Grand Vitara. Now the Grand Vitara, the ride quality, it was great, but in terms of insulation, it didn't feel as well damped as this one. So I think that's one big change that I've noticed in the Victoris, and I think again it is down to the customer feed that Maruti Suzuki must have received from its existing customers, so they've definitely worked on that. Another thing is the steering wheel. Well, I think it is well weighted, and in terms of handling, well, again, it's not a hot hatch, but the steering is well weighted. It feels a little more precise than what we have in the Grand Vitara, and overall I think this is a more enjoyable package again compared to the Grand Vitara. So in every regard, well, they have improved this chassis, the steering, and even the ride quality.
Well, Maruti Suzuki has pulled out all the stops with the Victoris in the safety department. It recently received a 5-star safety rating in both global NCAP and Bharat NCAP crash tests. As for its safety net, it gets 6 airbags and ESC as standard. The level 2 ADAS systems though are only available with the 6-speed 80 variants, which means they aren't even offered with the strong hybrid version.
It's unlikely that you'll see a Toyota badge here. At least that's what Maruti Suzuki is telling us. And it makes sense because this version, the Victoris, is made entirely by Maruti Suzuki at their own plant, whereas the Grand Vitara or the Hyryder is currently manufactured by Toyota. Of course, the Victoris is still going to share the same hybrid technology from the Hyryder, but this is made entirely by Maruti Suzuki now. So that's why they're saying that a Toyota version is unlikely. And if you think about it, it also makes sense because right now the Victoris and Grand Vitara are going to be sold through different channels. So this one is going to be sold through the Arena network, whereas the Grand Vitara will continue to be sold at Nexa dealerships. So in case of Toyota, if they have their version of the Victoris come out, well, it'll share the showroom floor with the Hyryder. It doesn't really make sense because if you have the Victoris, which is a more affordable and more superior version compared to the Hyryder, it can't be sitting in the same showroom with this version. Now, what could happen in the future is that we'd see a similar feature upgrade for the Grand Vitara and the Hyryder, and then it'll make more sense because right now whatever features are missing in the Grand Vitara and the Hyryder, well, I think Toyota and Maruti both will introduce them for their customers, and then the Victoris will continue to sell in all the other Arena dealerships. To be honest, it has got all the ingredients to go toe-to-toe with the Hyundai Creta. But of course, if you are an enthusiast, it does miss out on a turbo petrol engine. So in case you want outright performance, well, you have to rule this out and you have to look at the Hyundai, Kia, Skoda or Volkswagen in that regard. But in all the other areas, I think the Victoris has all the bases well and truly covered, and it probably is going to rule the sales chart because of its wider dealer network now. Now again, does it dethrone the Creta or its rivals? Well, that's a question for another day, and of course we are going to be pitching it against the Creta and its main rivals in our next video. So stay tuned for our next video and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.